Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, or MGM as we know it, was formed in 1924 by one Marcus Lowe, who owned the Lowe's Theater chain. Just a few years prior, Mr. Lowe had bought the floundering Metro Pictures Corporation. He subsequently purchased Goldwyn Pictures, and for a time was headquartered out of Fort Lee, New Jersey. In the early 1920s, motion picture production was escaping the harsh East Coast winters, moving west to Southern California with its perennial sunshine and warm weather. The newly formed Metro was no exception. With the purchase of the financially strapped Goldwyn Pictures from its namesake Samuel Goldwyn, the company soon settled into a new facility in Culver City, California. This new facility, the original Triangle Pictures Studios, had previously gone into receivership by Paramount Pictures founder Adolph Zukor. It was eventually purchased by Goldwyn Pictures, which in of itself went into receivership. The studio's uniqueness consisted of a colonnade, which separated the lot entrance from the street. Also with this purchase, more notably, arrived Leo the Lion. In his early days, Leo was mute. He would eventually become vocal as the years went on. With these new acquisitions, Mr. Lowe found that he needed strong, formidable management to run the day-to-day operations of his new studio. He found such in the person of one Louis B. Mayer, a successful studio boss himself. Mayer had been producing low-budget silent films for a short time, and his films proved lucrative. Lowe sent his assistant, Nicholas Schenck, to speak with Mayer, and the talks resulted in the formation, in April of 1924, of adding the Mayer name to Metro and Goldwyn, hence Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. With the name addition, Mayer was named Vice President of Studio Operations, de facto studio chief. He brought in Irving Thalberg as chief of production. Thalberg, a former executive at Universal Pictures, has successfully overseen production of over 100 films during his brief time with that studio. He would later marry one of MGM's top stars, the talented Norma Shearer. In its first 2 years, MGM would produce more than 100 feature films, one of whom was the highly successful Ben-Hur, which took in a profit of $4.7 million. Still producing silent films at this time, MGM featured many up-and-coming stars, the likes of Joan Crawford, Greta Garbo, John Gilbert, and Gary Cooper. In the years to follow, MGM would become an enormous motion picture studio, a city within a city, built on 6 separate lots. These separate lots consisting of production support offices, 28 sound stages, a commissary, barber shop, fan mail, and publicity offices. The industrial center of the studio consisted of carpenter shops, a lumber mill, machine shop and foundry, a blacksmith shop, and nearly everything else needed for motion picture production. The casting office handled as many as 12,000 calls within a day. A huge film laboratory processed an average of 4.5 million feet of film per week. The art department, headed by the legendary Academy Award-winning art director Cedric Gibbons, was renowned for producing the most lavish and detailed film sets that served to create MGM's association with wealth and class. Given the enormous resources, MGM's exterior and interior sets were considered the best by industry standards. As many as 100,000 yards of fabric and other materials were cut annually in the wardrobe department, which had 15 warehouses, housing some 150,000 costumes representing nearly every historical period. And it was here that MGM's most notable fashion designer, Adrian, supplied the style for MGM's biggest stars. Over in the projection department, the 22 screening rooms ran enough film on a daily basis to provide prints to some 40 exhibitors. It was also in these screening rooms that rushes, known better today as dailies, were screened. This is material that had been filmed during the production day, to be screened and critiqued by the film director, producer, and etc. Miscues, blown lines, etc. would be noticed in the rushes, which may call for an edit or reshoot of the scene. One of the more notable of MGM's enormous backlots was Lot 2, which was known in some circles as the Andy Hardy lot. This 37-acre piece of land was used to film King Vidor's The Big Parade from 1925. The prison scene from The Big House, 1930, was also shot here. Lot 2 also served as a middle-class town of Carvel, as a young Mickey Rooney filmed his Andy Hardy film series here. In addition, a huge swimming pool had been constructed on this back lot, the pool serving for many of Esther Williams' swim scenes. In a streamlined building on the northeast corner of Lot 2 was the animation department. It was right here in 1937 that the Cat and Mouse team of Tom and Jerry was created. The animation studio, albeit owned and controlled by MGM, was run by two up-and-coming animation directors, William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, who would later go on to prominence with their own cartoon production company. In the 1950s, a young man went to work as an errand boy in the animation studio and received an introduction to an industry in which he would later become a major figure. His name, Jack Nicholson. MGM was the last studio to transition from silent films to talkies, having noticed rival studio Warner Brothers' success with The Jazz Singer. Yet it did so as the public so demanded. Now you can not only see, you can hear the voices of Joan Crawford, Norma Shearer, Gary Cooper, among many others. The stock market crash of 1929, leading to the worst economic downturn in America's history, forced many industry people to take drastic pay cuts, and MGM was no exception. In 1933, Louis B. Mayer announced that every studio in Hollywood was on the verge of closing if a 50% pay cut was not accepted. Stars, writers, directors, those who commanded the top salaries had to approve. Other lesser studios, such as Columbia and RKO, were letting their staff go, while MGM proposed pay cuts across the board for those except lower salaried employees. Still, through it all, MGM continued to make motion pictures, releasing on average one per week. It was around this time that one of MGM's top stars, Clark Gable, refused a role that Mayer thought was suitable for the up-and-coming matinee idol. Rather than place Gable on suspension, Mayer, as means of punishment, loaned him out to Columbia, a studio whose moniker of the time was Poverty Row. Columbia studio boss Harry Cohn, along with director Frank Capra, immediately paired Gable with Claudette Colbert in a low-budget film, It Happened One Night. This film became unique on two counts, in that Gable was photographed shirtless, a first despite pre-production code guidelines, thus confirming his status as a big screen heartthrob. The other being that this film became a huge box office success, pulling Columbia out of its Poverty Row status. Upon his return to Culver City, Clark Gable was one of the most demanding actors in the industry, a first among equals. Also at MGM was Cosmopolitan Pictures, spearheaded by newspaper tycoon William Randolph Hearst. He and studio chief L.B. Mayer never saw eye to eye, as Hearst's mistress, the actress Marion Davies, was denied the title role in Marie Antoinette, as well as other leading role vehicles. Moreover, in all of Ms. Davies' films, Hearst demanded that the dailies and rough cuts be sent to him at his San Simeon estate, at which he ordered rewrites, reshoots, etc., resulting in the films going significantly over budget. Mayer and Irving Thalberg both demanded that Hearst compensate out of pocket for such losses, to no avail. In addition, Marion Davies was beginning to look older. Alcohol was beginning to take its toll on her appearance, and in 1934, Cosmopolitan bid farewell to Culver City and moved to Burbank, settling in at Warner Brothers, until Ms. Davies' retirement from the screen 2 years later. As America was making its slow climb out of the economic depression, The Culver City studio saw two major losses in the late 1930s. Production chief Irving Thalberg, who had been in poor health for years, passed away on September 14, 1936. His wife, the actress Norma Shearer, was inconsolable. A whiz kid of sorts, Thalberg was instrumental in making MGM the most powerful studio in the industry. The following year, on June 7, 1937, the studio suffered the loss of blonde bombshell Jean Harlow at the age of 26. Harlow had been shooting the film Saratoga when she suddenly fell ill. Some say it was kidney failure. Saratoga would be completed with Harlow's body double standing in, her voice dubbed for speaking cues. On June 9th, the day of her funeral, MGM Studios shut down for the day as it and all of Hollywood mourned. 1939 saw an epic blockbuster in the form of Gone with the Wind. Producer David O. Selznick bought the rights to the story in 1936 from author Margaret Mitchell, and from the start agonized over who to cast for the role of Rhett Butler. Two who were considered were Gary Cooper and Errol Flynn, but each were under contract to their respective studios. Through a deal struck with Louis B. Mayer, movie idol Clark Gable was loaned out to Selznick for the role. Several actresses were considered for Scarlett O'Hara, including Katharine Hepburn, Jean Arthur, Lana Turner, and Paulette Goddard, who was offered the role, yet controversy over her marriage to Charlie Chaplin caused Selznick to rescind the offer. An English actress named Vivien Leigh, not known in American entertainment circles, underwent several screen tests for Selznick and was cast as Scarlett. What do you say to that, Rhett?
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
George Cukor was assigned to direct the film, but 3 weeks into the shooting, Victor Fleming, who was subsequently directing The Wizard of Oz just across the street at Metro, replaced him. With both Gone with the Wind and Wizard of Oz both wrapped and released to nationwide theaters, the 1940s saw significant changes in the motion picture industry. Oh, we still had the Thin Man and Andy Hardy feel-good movies, as well as the Travel Talks and Pete Smith shorts produced by MGM, and the Tom and Jerry animated shorts. But America's involvement in World War II saw many top stars going military. The likes of Clark Gable, Jimmy Stewart, and Tyrone Power contributed to the war efforts. Hollywood's golden age was in full swing, and the economic times couldn't be better. Alas, few could forecast the changes yet to take place. In a United States Supreme Court antitrust case of 1948, the motion picture studios were forced to divest themselves of the movie theaters they owned. Thus, the court ruled that the studios could no longer block book or sell multiple films to a theater as one unit. Up to this point, the major studios owned the theaters in which their films were shown. These theaters had been distributed films as a package deal from the parent studios. This decision affected MGM greatly, as it did rival studios Warner Brothers, Paramount, and RKO. Many claimed that the studios were double dipping from a profit standpoint. As a result of the ruling, the movie theaters were sold off at a small profit. Another big change to the industry, television. Introduced to the public in the late 40s, the small screen greatly impacted movie attendance. All of the studios felt this impact. MGM was no exception. Films were still being produced, yet the Andy Hardy and Thin Man serials had been discontinued. With the loss of audience, stars' contracts were being canceled. Many stars were forming their own production companies, as they were no longer enslaved by studio contract clauses. In some cases, the studio moguls forbade actors to appear on any television series, even to promote their own films. Initially, MGM considered television a threat, as did the other studios. However, it eventually found that television represented a new market for its films, one that would be essential to its survival. With its high overhead expenses, MGM's profit margins continued to dwindle. Back at the New York offices, Nicholas Schenck, head of parent company Lowe's, ordered Louis B. Mayer to find a new assistant head to improve film quality while cutting costs. Mayer did find such in the person of Dory Schary, a writer and producer who had previously run competing studio RKO. It was not a good pairing. Schary and Mayer were constantly at odds, with one favoring musicals, the other into wholesome family materials. Some studio executives saw this as the eventual downfall of MGM. No secret was there of the enmity between L.B. Mayer and Nick Schenck. Many insiders knew that the two men detested each other. Mayer secretly referred to his boss as Nick Skunk. The installment of Dory Schary, it was widely suspected, marked the beginning of the end of Mayer's reign at the studio. As mentioned, longtime contract players were let go and a new regime of actors, writers, and directors were filling vacancies. Both Nicholas Schenck and Dory Schary were, so it seemed, edging Mayer out. In May of 1951, Mayer wrote a scathing letter to Schenck, saying pointedly, "It's him or me," the him being Schary. After the briefest of showdowns, on May 30th, 1951, Louis B. Mayer was ousted. After 27 years as head of studio operations, an era was ended. Dory Schary, the new studio boss, took MGM to a new level. As the 1950s progressed, the studio, while still making movies, concentrated more and more into the television foray. Thus, the weekly series MGM Parade was born. In addition, the studio, realizing that it was profiting from the reruns of the Tom and Jerry cartoon features, shut down its animation department, laying off all its staff, most notably the team of Bill Hanna and Joe Barbera, both of whom would go on to build an animation empire all of their own. Yet his run as head of the studio would not last as long as expected. In 1956, it was reported by Time magazine that Dory Schary was about to be removed from his position at MGM. The reason? The studio had shown an operating deficit of $3 million, the heaviest loss in nearly 10 years. At a meeting with parent company Lowe's executives 2 days after the report, Dory Schary was fired. Subsequently, the deposed Louis B. Mayer was rallying to get his old job back at Culver City. He surrounded himself with consultants and advisors, and it was reported that he held secret meetings with Lou Wasserman, head of United Artists, a powerful man in his own right. Yet it was not to be. Mayer was unsuccessful in his bid for reinstatement. It was also at this time that his health began to fail. He felt tired and zapped of energy. The doctors diagnosed anemia, and he began to receive blood transfusions. Yet another ailment had weakened Mr. Mayer, leukemia. As his energy waned, Mayer continued to rally, engaging in industry discussions with actors, producers, and studio executives, until the end. Louis B. Mayer passed away on October 29, 1957. He was eulogized as a true pioneer. Meanwhile, back at Culver City, changes continued, and not necessarily for the better. There were no more contract players, and the studio was hemorrhaging money. By the 1960s, MGM was operating at growing fiscal losses. In 1969, it began to sell off its assets. Lot 2, which is the Andy Hardy lot, Lot 3, the backlot for Meet Me in St. Louis, and several Western films were sold, demolished, and rebuilt into residential streets for condos and apartments. Lot 5, where the Tarzan movies were shot, became a small shopping center. When all was said and done, by 1970, all the studio had left was Lot 1, with 44 acres, 25 sound stages, and the film laboratory. Also in that year, notable props and costumes were auctioned off, including Judy Garland's ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz, Elizabeth Taylor's wedding dress from Father of the Bride, and many others. Jean Harlow's gown, Clark Gable's trench coat, Norma Shearer's dress. Everything went. Surviving MGM stars who attended the auctions were, to say the least, disheartened and disillusioned. These words from actress Debbie Reynolds, who attended the auctions and paid upwards of $250,000 for many of the costumes. MGM was now being run by a television executive in the person of James Aubrey, a former executive with ABC Television. Under Aubrey's reign, MGM was worth more dead than alive. Its facility had been stripped down to practically a bare shell of its former glory. The Thalberg building and other offices continued to exist, yet the faces within were younger and seemingly indifferent. Also in the 70s, Lorimar Pictures settled into the Culver City film lot, this company producing long-running TV productions such as The Waltons, Eight is Enough, and Dallas, among others. After a succession of owners, one of whom was media mogul Ted Turner, MGM, now merged with United Artists, was not so much a film factory as it was a film distributor. Movies were still being filmed on the lot, but at a lower ratio than television series. The MGM era officially came to an end in 1986, so it's believed by many. In November of that year, the official Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer signage, perched high atop Washington Avenue, was dismantled. In its place, Lorimar Telepictures. 3 years later, the lot was sold to the Sony Corporation, whose new acquisition was Columbia Pictures. Columbia, which had most recently been on the Warner Brothers lot in Burbank, was moved into this facility, and for a brief time, the Culver City lot was renamed Columbia Studios. With Sony's new acquisition and a $100 million renovation, the historic MGM Studios became Sony Pictures Studios. Today, the Culver City facility, now home to Columbia Studios, still holds its roots in filmmaking history. The Colonnade and several other buildings on the lot are named for longtime MGM notables. There's the Thalberg building, named for producer Irving Thalberg, screening rooms and staff facilities named for director Frank Capra, and actors Clark Gable, Spencer Tracy, Jimmy Stewart, and others. Many shows are taped on the lot today, most notably the game shows Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune. MGM, the company, still exists, albeit in the form of a Las Vegas-based hotel and casino. In 2001, MGM part-owned a 35-story corporate tower in Century City, called simply the MGM Tower. Teetering on bankruptcy by the late 2000s, MGM vacated its namesake tower in 2011, moving to a smaller facility in Beverly Hills. Today, MGM holds a vast library of classic films, most of whom can be seen on Turner Classic Movies. The stars of today and tomorrow have only the stars of yesterday to thank for paving the road to their success. Right, Leo? I cannot conclude this video without mentioning Douglas Shearer, recording director at MGM for 40 years. Mr. Shearer, the brother of actress Norma, was instrumental in recording sound, and he was there with the birth of sound recording and sound pictures. Douglas Shearer was a true pioneer in the film industry.